Welcome to the EchoCast, episode 89, Hardcore. I am Bon Diesel. This is a podcast about the Division franchise, the Division 2 game, its community, news, updates, speculation, and whatever else I feel like talking about. This week, we are going to talk about the state of the game recap, hardcore mode, Scarlet compatibility, Division 2 community topics, listener questions, and some content updates. If you would like to support the show and any of my other content, please check out patreon.com/theechocast. Thank you for our Patreon supporters for this month: Hassan, Christian, Darren, Justin, Joe, Tim, PK, Iceman, and DJ. Just as a heads up, I am doing a Division 2 Tommy the Teddy Bear giveaway on my Twitter. Go check out my pinned tweet on @BonDiesel. BAUNDIESEL. Okay, so Division 2 news recap for this week. We actually had a State of the Game number 140. We had Hamish Yannick and Drew Reckner talking about Title Update 6.1 and some upcoming events. The big news was Title Update 6.1 is coming. It's going to be here on December 10th, which is this coming Tuesday, depending on when you listen to this. They talked about a bunch of fixes and balances. They talked about Situation Snowball, which is going to be there's going to be some NPCs wearing Santa hats. The Hoarder NPC or the Loot Gremlin, or whatever you want to call them, will have a hat on, and if you kill them, you will get the hat and a snowball gun. So yeah. To make up for that, they did drop some pretty big news about the hardcore mode beta coming out as well. The hardcore mode will be a permadeath mode that is essentially the regular game, but has any complete death where you're all the way down is permanent death. You are down for the count, you lose everything. This will be on a separate server, so you aren't able to play with people who are in the regular game or share gear with your other characters. I believe you don't even get the stash. So you have what you have on your character. So I think that's actually going to be more interesting than people are giving it credit for so far. Let's see. This will include activities like the raid, the DZs, I think even Kinley College, and so on. So I have to imagine that even like conflict technically will be in there. The DZ. I'll talk about that in a moment. There will be some cosmetic rewards. We know that when you hit level 2, you get a YOLO hat, and I believe that should be shared with all of your characters. And Drew kind of, I think, maybe accidentally let it slip that the higher in level you get, there's actually more cosmetics. So, you'll be able to show off your hardcore prestige. They did remind and they reinforced pretty heavily that this will be a beta. And that there will be issues. So, try to, report issues that you find and try to not get too upset about them, because they're going to happen. Beyond that, they also talked about an apparel event that is coming, that in a nice change is going to bring 4 really cool cosmetics sets that are going to satisfy, I think, a lot of people's desire for some more realistic and gritty cosmetics to wear. I believe it's Silent Night, I think is what they're calling it. And then at the end, there were some developer Q&A videos that I do suggest you actually check out the VOD to see yourself. So my thoughts on it: I thought it was a great show, especially after things have been so quiet lately. The fixes and balancing of 6.1 sound good. It's obviously not going to fix everything. They did acknowledge they're still working on much larger issues such as the loot game, PvP balance, and so on. At some point, no amount of info is going to satisfy everyone. So, they could tell us everything that the Division 2 is going to release for the next 2 years, and there would still be people who don't feel like they're being transparent enough. So at some point try to mine the static a bit and try to be realistic about what we are getting. I thought this was a pretty good start. I still wish that we were getting some episode 3 content, at least teasers before the end of the year, but you know, it is what it is. I do think the hardcore mode sounds really cool. I think it's something I'll definitely mess with for at least a little while. I could definitely see myself get kind of tired of it relatively quickly. But I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a way to, it's going to be a challenge to get through while we wait for episode 3. Really more than anything in hardcore, I'm excited to see what the DZ will be like, because the stakes, there's actually stakes. The big issue is that there's not really better loot there. Like, there's not really any incentive to go to the DZ in this hardcore mode. So I'm curious. I think eventually people are gonna find it to be a place to go to kind of have that ultimate DZ experience. I'm just wondering how many people are really gonna be willing to do it. I honestly think we're getting this hardcore mode because it's in a good enough state for them to show it to us and to slap a big beta label on it. Because they, at this point, have heard enough people say that, I don't think there's a lot of people who are willing to stick around until episode 3 with nothing new to do. So I do think this is a solution to that. We'll have to see whether or not it tides people over, but I do like it. I think the snowball shooting gun part of this whole thing sounds super cheesy and lame, but I'll say that the cosmetic sets they're putting out makes up for it, and I'll just try to ignore the silliness. One thing that they did throw out that I thought was that they needed to do is, I think it was right at the beginning of the podcast, or whatever you consider it, the state of the game. They basically just said, like, hey, we have no current plans to bring back the underground or survival. And I think that was really important, because I'm sure it happens in most games. I guess I've never been so involved in a community before, but it really, maybe I'm an old man or whatever, I don't know, but it has just blown my mind how stubborn a decent number of people have been about just not accepting that we have a new game. I don't put down at all people's good feelings and stuff about Division 1 and survival and underground specifically. Those are both modes I highly enjoyed. I do think people are a little convenient about their memories about the modes. Now I will say underground was the mode I basically only played for the last year of the game, because even though it was repetitive, I enjoyed fighting hunters. I enjoyed just talking on stream and kind of blowing through mindless content with a chance of getting some rewards. That was cool. Survival was weird. I kind of started streaming it before it got real hot, because it was hot when survival came out, and then it kind of died off, and then I started streaming it because I noticed a few other people were, and then shortly after I did, and not because of me obviously, but a bunch of people started streaming it, and I believe it had something to do with how Splinter Shield and some other people from the Reddit subreddit for Division kind of started organizing these tournaments. But there got a point where the only thing people were doing was streaming survival, which is great. I'll say around that time is when I had only played survival for a while, and it got super boring for me. It's the same thing over and over. Every time I see people talk about how it's a new experience every time. I mean, kinda. Either you run into a player in a certain spot or you don't. But otherwise, kind of the same thing. That said, I think it was really good for them to come out and say this, because every time there's some content dropping, there's people who are just saying, oh, I hope it's survival, I hope it's underground, I hope it's survival, I hope it's underground. And I get it, and I've said it before, I enjoyed those modes, I just said it again. But if you look at it from the devs' point of view, they probably don't want to just rehash the same content as from the first game. I have been the biggest proponent of anyone to say that episode 1 and 2, from a content perspective, were pretty meh. They weren't great, they weren't survival, they weren't underground, for sure. I'm completely down with that. But what they also weren't were these they were content. They were free content, and I think that probably has a big thing to do with it, for better or worse. And I'm glad they kind of put this out there just to say, like, hey, it's not happening, at least not anytime soon. But then they did continue on and say, but we hear you guys. What I think people maybe are doing is they remember there were a lot of things about Underground and survival they really did enjoy. And maybe that means that they're kind of ignoring the like multitude of issues that those modes had when it came to playability, replayability. It's something I talk a lot about, that concept with PvP, and that I think people remember some of the fun they had with PvP, and either don't care about or just ignore some of the really base mechanical issues that the PvP in Division 1 had, and that we still have today in Division 2. And I've been kind of saying this for a while. I don't think people should expect Survival 2.0 or Last Stand 2.0. Maybe Last Stand, actually. I think Last Stand may actually happen. But like Underground 2.0, those are probably not going to happen. What I would expect to see is, I wouldn't be surprised if this hardcore mode in its final state, quote unquote, actually starts to throw in some survival ideas. I think that, and this is probably gonna make some people mad, but I think hardcore actually shouldn't delete your character. It should just delete all of the gear you had, and have you come back at the same level and just have like gray gear, or the most basic, super duper basic, where you have to go refarm again. And this is even if you die at end game, full gear score, 500 gear score, you're loaded up in 500 gear score gear, and you die. You get loaded up with, world tier 5 gear, but it's gray and it's not very good, and you're gonna have to go out and grind again for some gear. I think that hardcore will probably take some elements eventually that maybe resemble, things that they learned from survival. I think that we're gonna get modes at some point, hopefully, that bring some of what people liked about the Underground, the kind of random levels, the kind of maybe some of the cramped areas, some of the unique spaces and things like that. I mean, I still remember how much fun I had when I realized that the gold storage room was on my run of the Underground, or the dance hall. That was really fun, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see elements of those modes show up again. But I just really think people need to kind of maybe move on from this idea that they're just going to copy and paste these modes. And I mean, and it's even worse when you see people talking about, well, I sure hope episode 3 is the entire Manhattan map copy and pasted into Division 2. Like, that's not gonna happen. That's not what episode 3 is gonna be. That would be like a Division 3. That's a whole different people. I don't think people remember that, like, they built Division 1 as close to scale as they probably could. But the impression I'm under is that it was like 75% scale or 80, including like the characters and stuff like that. Well, with Division 2, because they use like LiDAR data and stuff like that to help them make the map, it's actually 1-to-1. And I'm under the impression that if you took the characters from Division 1 and put them in Division 2, they'd be like 5 foot tall. And I'm under the impression, and I may be making this up, I talked about this in a Twitter post. I think this was at one of the events that I was told this or heard this, and I believe it's okay to talk about it, I hope. But I'm under the impression that's why like all the character models and the animations and stuff are different, because they had to start over essentially, because the character models from the first game, if they tried to stick them into Division 2 and just maybe update some of the the fidelity, they just would have been itty bitty. And the impression I'm under is that you just can't stretch these models out, because it jacks up the internal skeleton and the animations and all that, and they just you have to start over. And that's the same reason why I think all this assumption from some people that they're just going to copy and paste Division 1 into Division 2. Please ignore my fantasy football warning. The people who think that that's what is going to happen, I feel like this community has such a habit of setting itself up for disappointment over and over and over and over and over again. And that's definitely partially on the devs and stuff like that. They, if they communicate more effectively, if they give us better roadmaps and they set expectations better, people won't do that. but it's also kind of on the people. Every time there's a big patch, and it happened in Division 1 and it's still happening in Division 2, every time there's a big patch coming, people will start speculating these crazy grand ideas. I've seen it, we'll talk about it later on, but talking about having like all 4 seasons are just going to show up in the game. Like, that's not going to happen. At least not right now. There's no indication right now to believe that all of a sudden Division 2 is going to have all 4 seasons in the game, and it's as simple as that. They just hit a button and now there's 4 seasons. There's nothing wrong with obviously criticizing the game. I'm happy to do it myself, believe it or not. There's nothing wrong with asking for big things. But there is something wrong, in my opinion, with not even considering how realistic a request is and things like that. But I think a lot of that can be handled with better communication, which hopefully is going to be a theme as we move on, and with all the changes they say they're making. Okay, so that was State of the Game. It was a good one. Can't wait to play some hardcore. Some other gaming news I thought was kind of interesting. Phil Spencer tweeted out. Phil Spencer is the big Xbox face man, basically, talking about how he is using a Scarlett at his home, which is the next Xbox, and it's his full-time machine. So what I think is really interesting about that is I had actually talked on Twitter a while back about, like, hey, like, do you guys think that, how do you guys think that, Division 2 is going to handle the next gen systems? And it was really weird. There was like some really like aggressive and kind of rude responses of like, oh, that's not going to be a thing. They're not going to, it's not going to be supported. You're gonna have to do backwards compatibility or whatever. And what's interesting about what he was saying is that it sounds like he's basically playing everything. And what I don't think people like, well, I don't know how many people realize, how this all works, but like when the PlayStation 3 released, the PlayStation 2 used regular DVD CDs, and the PlayStation 3 used Blu-rays. And what it also did is, I believe that was the generation where it went from a proprietary like operating system to like a game box or something more open. And it may have been PS4 when Sony did it. But what I'm saying is that, like, there were only certain types of PlayStation 3s that could play PlayStation 2 games, because only those certain PS3s had the right hardware to even read PS2 disc and play them. And then there were PS3s that didn't have that technology, and you couldn't play the PS2 games because they were just different technologies. What I think is interesting, and what I think this is saying, what Phil Spencer, was kind of hinting maybe, is that the move to Xbox Scarlett and maybe PS5 for PlayStation players is going to be more like the move from Xbox One to Xbox One X, where it's pretty much the same system, just way super beefed up, and allowing you to play at much higher fidelity and graphics and stuff like that. Now, what I don't know if that means is games that are made, say games that are made for the Xbox Scarlett, say 2 years from now, what does that mean for the Xbox original or for the One X even? And what my guess is that there will be a point where they're going to be like, yeah, these games that are coming out, they won't play on the original Xbox. I kind of hope so, because then games can push themselves a lot further. But what it may mean is that they say, your Xbox or even your One X can't play this game. It's not high enough fidelity. It doesn't have enough power, but it can be used as a xCloud machine, and then you can play those games. So I think that's what they're going to do, because I really think the Xbox is going to push services a lot when it comes to the next generation. And I think that xCloud is probably going to be the biggest part of that. Between that, xCloud and Game Pass, I think they're going to make a big deal out of, like, you have an Xbox One X and now the games don't work on, you can't play Scarlett games. Well, you can if you get Game Pass and xCloud, which I think are going to be bundled, and then you can play them on your Xbox, and you'll be good. You're just going to have to stream it instead of playing it on hardware. But if you do want to play on hardware with the best performance and the best, reaction times and all that, get your Xbox Scarlett and you're good to go. So I don't know. I just thought it was a cool tidbit, and it was fun kind of watching some of the conversation around that. Something else I've seen a lot of talk about recently is Escape from Tarkov. I actually started playing it again in the last week or so. I played it a few months ago and then kind of got out of it. And then I know that they released a new pretty big patch, so I jumped back in. It's really fashionable right now. What's kind of interesting is I see a lot of people comparing it to the DZ, or talking about like, oh, if you like the DZ, you'll like this game. I get that comparison. It's not the same. I hope people are very aware. I hope that no one who is maybe disappointed with Division 2 sees this and is like, oh man, I need to go buy Tarkov. I need to go, spend $1,000 on a PC and buy Escape from Tarkov and then go play the real DZ again. Escape from Tarkov is not the Division. It is not the DZ. It is a whole different beast. Escape from Tarkov is a game where you start with very little, and you go into raids, which are game instances that only last, I think, 45 minutes. And you can collect loot and guns and gear from all these various locations. There is PvE. There's a bunch of AI enemies in the map that you can kill and loot, or that can kill you, sometimes with headshots from 500 meters away. But then there's also other players, and some of them may play a lot and have hilarious amounts of gear and armor, and you may have a pistol and a hat. And when you die, you lose everything you have on you, and you have to heal your character. And it's a very, 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 very in-depth game. It's a very challenging game. It's not a very forgiving game. Now I have said before, and I've actually said in the video probably a year ago or more, that I would actually like to see some of the elements of Tarkov be introduced into the Division 2. Some of the more punishing ones. I also don't think it would be very popular with the community. But I think it's really cool that people are getting into Tarkov. It's a great game, and I think it may satisfy what people thought the DZ was going to be before Division 1 even came out. But I really just do caution people, do not go into Escape from Tarkov thinking it's Division. It's a first-person shooter. It's a hyper-realistic damage model. It's hyper complicated with tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of different things to do, ways to play the game, things to collect, the way that your guns work, even ammo. I mean, for each like ammo caliber, there's like different qualities of the ammo. So some of the ammo will like pierce helmets and kill people in one shot, but that's like super rare and hard to find and expensive. But then most of the ammo you find, you have to hit people like 5 times if they're wearing any armor. It's a really complicated game. What I highly suggest is checking out some streams of it. I personally like watching Shroud play it, and it's hard to watch him because he gets a lot of help and he's super good at video games, so it's not very realistic. He gets a lot of help and has been helped out a lot by people in the community, so he has every bit of gear and all the money he could ever use. And he's super good at shooting games, so he wins a lot of fights that most people wouldn't. So he may not be the best one to watch to learn from, but there's lots and lots of videos to check out as well. I just definitely check it out if you're in that. If you're looking for something to play, I just caution you, it is not the Division. If you're on Xbox, I do suggest though, there's a free-to-play game called Vigor that you can play and download. It actually is a little bit more like, so it's essentially a super, super simplified version of Escape from Tarkov, but it's actually in third person. So it has some of that Division vibe. It is where you go in, if you die, you lose everything that your character has on you. So you can go into a map with like a pistol with 1 magazine and hope that you can loot some stuff or kill another player and then take their gear and then be all geared up. Or you can go in all geared up and ready to rumble, but all it's going to take is 1 pistol shot and you're dead. And you will not get that gear back, but it's a lot more forgiving with crafting new gear and stuff like that. So if you're on Xbox, check out Vigor. It's a really fun game. It's a super, super, super babyfied version of Escape from Tarkov. And then the last thing, Call of Duty Season 1. Call of Duty has released their first season, and that features a battle pass. I don't know how. I was trying to figure out on the stream last night, twitch.tv/BondDiesel. I had 1,100 Call of Duty credits. You could have used them for the last month or two by buying some goofy cosmetic thing. But then when the season 1 started, the season pass is 1,000 credits, so I actually used it on that. So I got the first season pass for free. I feel bad for all the people who spent those credits on the stupid cosmetic, but so far, I really like it. There's a ton of new cosmetics, like an insane amount of new cosmetics. And there's 2 new guns. There's an LMG and an assault rifle. So, and I really want the assault rifle. It's a Tavor. If you know guns, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that's like one of my favorite guns in all games, even the Division 2. I believe it's the TAR 21 in Division 2. So it's got new maps. It's got the classic crash map with the helicopter from Call of Duty 4. I'm completely lost on it. I forget everything about that damn map. But the game seems to be finding a sweet spot. Now, I did read about a whole bunch of issues and complaints people have about a bunch of stuff in this patch. I don't know. I'm too easy to please, I guess. I don't know. I think it's great. I know for me, I plan on grinding this a ton until Division 2 Episode 3 comes out. Even though I do plan on playing some hardcore and continuing to make some builds and go after named items in Division 2. You'll definitely see me playing quite a bit of Call of Duty. Unfortunately, on the stream, my numbers are about 1/4 of what they normally would be if I was playing Division, but it's fine. I get it. You know what else I get? I get mid-roll ads. So here's one for about 30 seconds and we'll be right back. Okay, so some Division community topics. This is where I scour the subreddit and pick a few topics I want to talk about. The first one is talking about, there was a few posts I actually saw comparing the Division 1 environmental effects to Division 2. Now, obviously, the one I saw, it was really cool. I assume this is someone playing on a super heavy PC rig, with just everything turned up to max, and it was their character just walking through Times Square with the snow falling at nighttime, and it's just freaking gorgeous. What I'll say is I feel bad for Division 2 in a lot of ways, because in a lot of ways Division 2 is a much better looking game, represents a downtrodden and destroyed world so much better. It looks so much more real and as to be expected, whereas I felt like New York was a little too clean, except like the northern DZ, which was horrifying. But I really think Division 2 has a lot of those really cool moments as well. It's just different, right? The snow really is hard to beat. I mean, I love the rain effects and a lot of the nighttime effects in Division 2, especially the thunderstorms are really cool. But man, the snow and the fog of Division 1, hard to beat, right? What was actually funny to me, what I noticed the most is kind of what I was talking about earlier with the player models and stuff, is I just still can't get over just how much cleaner, like, I think it's the camera angle in Division 2. It feels like we're way closer to the character, which I do hate. I at least wish we had the option to pull it back a little bit. I know the field of view thing helps a little, but not really. It's that, and then it's just like the Division 2 characters just always seem like kind of like they're leaning forward, and their arms are kind of out. Like they're like, I don't know, it's really weird. It's like they're like gorillas. And I feel like all the characters look like they're just kind of awkwardly like leaning, kind of hunched forward with their arms out, and just kind of, where like Division 1, I remember just how, how sleek and how like, I don't know, just how they just looked a lot more like clean, a lot more sleek. And again, I'm sure it has something to do with what I was talking about before, but I will say, the environments obviously were beautiful in Division 1, but for me, it was actually looking at some of those walking animations and stuff like that. Obviously, there's a lot of really cool animations in Division 2. A lot of things I actually think were improved quite a bit, but then there's also a whole lot of things that I see from the old game where I'm like, man, like even just the characters' faces. I know we have all this customization in Division 2 now, but just like, even just the faces and like the female characters especially just looked a lot better in Division 1, I think. It's just weird. It's a real bummer that they had to like kind of do what they did when it came to at least what I suspect they had to do with the 1-to-1 thing and having to build new models and stuff, because I don't know if it got rushed. Maybe they didn't realize they were gonna have to do that until late in the game development or something. But it just, I don't know, the characters just seem so just so wide. And you would think as a thick boy myself, I'd be okay with that. But if I'm playing games, I want to be skinny and cute. Okay, so moving on. Division 1 is coming to Xbox Game Pass. I saw that. That's really cool. I know that's going to actually drive a bunch of people being like, oh, look, Division 2's dead. I'm pretty vocal about how I think people are very convenient about their memories of Division 1, but we won't go into that again. But I think this is really cool because I bet there's a lot of people who played Division 2 who never did play Division 1. And if they're on Xbox, like when I see posts about that, like, hey, I really like Division 2, should I try out Division 1? Obviously those posts get full of like, oh yeah, it's a way better game and stuff. Like, you know, that's an opinion, you know, but it is worth playing. I think it's absolutely a game that people should check out. I mean, it kind of clarifies what's going on in the story quite a bit. I really do think the 1 to 30 is great. You know, I don't think the end game is really all that enjoyable at this point, especially, but I think everyone who plays Division 2 should play through the 1 to 30 in Division 1. It's a cool story. There's some really I will fully say that like Fei Lao and a lot of those characters in Division 1 were much more impactful to me. I actually really do you know, I really like some of the characters in Division 2, but they just don't have the same depth, I guess. It just doesn't feel as personal as it did in the first game. So if you're on Xbox, go check it out. I highly suggest it. And I suspect that there's going to be some people who are going to play that and be like, oh, wow, this game's pretty cool. I wonder what Division 2 is like. Oh, it's only $20. Yes, please. You know, so hopefully that's how that works out. And then, yeah, the last topic I had was, you know, people, I saw, you know, some posts, and it kind of goes back to that conversation I was having about appropriate expectations and how I saw this talk about, like, you know, I've seen multiple posts, and it's because it's going to winter time here in the States. And, you know, people being like, man, I wonder if they're going to turn on snow in Division 2. So the impression I'm under about the Snowdrop engine is that from a developer perspective, there probably is and let me be very generous with this, a quote unquote relatively easy way to hit a button where a bunch of environmental stuff could be changed to make it seem like wintertime. I would assume the weather, I would assume the foliage and ground cover and stuff like that, maybe even the trees. I believe Snowdrop is kind of built where they can relatively easily adjust those things. The problem is with doing something like that is that it's not those things that would be the biggest challenge as far as I can tell. Please, for the love of God, if there's any devs left who listen to this podcast, I'm trying not to oversimplify this. What I assume would be the problem is like the character models. The way that, like, right now our character models, when you're out in the rain, your character's clothes get wet and their skin gets wet, and then when you're inside for long enough, it dries up. In Division 1 we had that, where snow would collect on top of your helmet, top of your backpack, stuff like that. I suspect that if they just flipped the switch, you know they have to go, but they would still have to go in and reprogram all of that stuff. You know, there's just so many things like that, you know, whether it comes to the various models in the environment that wouldn't automatically take snow and things like that. I mean, it's probably not going to happen. Now, I will say that for a next generation game, a Division 3 perhaps, hopefully, I really hope that Division 3 happens one day. I would say that may be a situation where they could maybe, you know, that's the other part, is they would have to design the story of the game to make sense with that. And, you know, the story of Division 1, 2, I understand that people don't love it, everyone, but it takes place in summer. Like, people have to realize that, like, even though we play this game for months and, you know, eventually years, you know, the game isn't following our timeline. Like, after the Pentagon mission, time stops in that world until episode 3 comes out. And then when more story content comes out, it pushes so I assume, I can't remember when the game, I want to say it takes place in like July or August. You know, when we go into DC, well, I'm under the impression that you finish the game like within like a couple weeks of that time. And then, you know, we had, you know, like the Pentagon missions then come, you know, or we fight off Black Tusk, and that's probably like a week or two in the timeline of the game. And then we go to the Pentagon. That's like another week maybe. So you're talking about like we're probably like in like late August or early September in the game's timeline. And so the story just doesn't even support the idea of like, oh, well, it's going to snow now. All of a sudden it's 3 months ahead of time. Now, maybe I'm a complete idiot. And maybe year two, they're going to release year two. The patch is coming on, April 15th. Year two's coming. Expect a big surprise. And, we play through episode 3. We go back to New York City. We do the thing there, whatever we're going to do there. And then episode 1 of year 2 releases, and people start up their game, and it pops up and says 4 months later. And then DC shows up and there's snow, and it's covered in snow everywhere. Now, what I need to be cautious of is the very problems I was talking about before are a problem here, right? The idea of changing the entire DC, everything about the game to a winter thing is probably not realistic, right? But that's a way they could do it. But we have no idea, because we have no idea if there is a year 2 or what a year 2 is going to look like. So I just think that there's a lot of discussion to have about like realistic expectations. I mean, I think the biggest issues in the community in this game right now are communication issues from the devs, and from the game, communication issues from the people who play the game and want to give feedback, saying something like, yeah, I was kind of disappointed with that. I wish that this would have been there, and that this would have been like this, and that would have been like that. That's great feedback. You suck. You guys ruined the game. Bring back Division 1. Quit Division 2. That's not good feedback. And unfortunately, I see more of one than I see of the other. And I assume you can guess, unless I'm just pigeonholed at some point. So there's a big communication issue going both ways. And there's an expectation issue. And that's a problem that goes both ways. From a lack of communication, players don't know what to expect appropriately. So players don't typically come up with conservative ideas about what's going to come. They go off the wall. And I think that's an issue that this game's dealt with its entire existence. Even in Division 1, it was a big problem. People forget that in Division 1, we got very little quote unquote new content after year 1 of Division 1. I know we got the West Side Piers. I personally think the West Side Piers kind of sucked. It didn't even look that great. It was kind of boring, except that the car wash was kind of cool. But otherwise, but that's just me. I don't know. I think it's interesting. It's fun to kind of try to watch it from the sidelines, even though I tend to drag myself in here and there. So we do have one listener question this week. If you have your own listener questions, ask me on Discord, ask me on YouTube, ask me on Twitter, ask me on my Patreon. There's a ton of places to ask questions, and I am happy to answer them on the show. This week we have Mick Short from Discord, who has 2 questions. One is, which cake are you likely to make for Lady Bond if you got into trouble with her? It would be a cheesecake, because her and her entire family could probably live off cheesecake if they were allowed. I never had cheesecake growing up. I don't get the idea of cream cheese. There's so many better things to make a dessert from, but her family loves their cheesecake, and if I want into Lady Bond's heart or Bay Diesel's heart, that's probably the way I would do it. Probably with some ice cream on the side. And then you asked if I ever played Battlefield, and if so, which ones? So the better question to ask is, which ones didn't I play? And I think I've played every Battlefield besides, I think it was Heroes, like the free-to-play thing. But yeah, 1942, or was it 1941? I know they did like the remaster. I want to say that was 42 maybe. The original one was 41. Battlefield 2. And then the Bad Company games, those are both awesome, especially Bad Company 2. I actually loved Battlefield 2142, and I have been hoping forever that I really thought that Battlefield 5 was going to be the Battlefield 2143. I was hoping it would be. I was okay with them going back to World War II. I think it was a little early. But oh man, Battlefield 2142 was my jam back in the day. I really got into Battlefield 3 and 4. This was all on PC. I still like Battlefield 4. I haven't played it in a while, but that's still such a freaking good game. Wasn't really into Battlefield 1 very much, the World War One game. It was okay. I don't think that time frame is very good for games because they had to stretch a lot to make it an enjoyable game, but it was fine. And then Battlefield 5, I mean, I think it's cool. I like Battlefield 5. I honestly probably haven't played it in over 6 months, but it's a cool game. I just kind of am good on the World War II genre now. But oh yeah, huge Battlefield fan. Love it. Really hoping that they do a 2142 sequel next. I think they may do like a Battlefield, like a modern one next, and then maybe do a future one. We'll have to wait and see. I just hope that the next time they release a game, they don't make stupid trailers. They don't condescendingly go after people who don't like their trailers. Battlefield deserves to be a really well respected and good game, and I really hope that they can get back to that. So yeah, Battlefield, love it, man. I appreciate the question, and like I said, if you have your own, feel free to ask them. And then the final thing here, some content updates. I don't really have a ton to go over. I do have a giveaway going for the Tommy the Teddy Bear Division 2 branded plushie. You can check it out on my Twitter if you want. It's a pinned tweet on there. You can enter, I think, 8 different ways. None of them require paying, so feel free. I will say that Twitter has this new lovely feature that allows me to hide replies to my tweets. I will use this on people who I think are trolling or making posts in bad faith. Even if I like you, if you're just being a dick on there, I posted a screenshot that I liked that I took a while ago, and there was some, passive aggressive trolley post on it, and I just hid it. I'm just kind of, I have plenty of posts for people to be critical and to say things about the game, constructive criticism, stuff like that. With my podcast announcements, when I request questions from people in the YouTube comments on my Discord, stuff like that. But it's like a time and a place kind of thing. If I'm posting something like, hey, happy Sunday, here's a cool screenshot, maybe that's not the place to be like, the devs suck, this game's terrible, I'm never coming back. That's not, I mean, that's cool. You can post that if you want, but you're probably going to get muted and you're probably going to get your comment hidden. I don't like, because it feels like censorship, which it absolutely is. But at the end of the day, there's plenty of personalities and plenty of accounts out there and plenty of people who would be happy to accept your toxic, sensational, passive aggressive stuff. Give it to them, post it to them. Because I'm not one of those people. I'm happy to see criticism, especially in the right time and place. I'm happy to talk about it. But when it's just really trolly, stupid stuff, I'm kind of done with it. I don't have time. I have so little time to do this stuff anymore that I'm going to create a nice, happy bubble around myself. And that doesn't mean a bubble without criticism. I'm happy to criticize the game, and I'm happy to hear actual criticism of the game. I just want to have actual conversations now, and I'm basically done with the silly, hot takes about, just being toxic and nasty. And if you don't know what my definition of toxic is, and you don't know the difference between toxicity and people who are just being honest or maybe a little sarcastic, that's on you. I know the difference. I know it when I see it. If you want to debate me about what's toxic to some people isn't to others, I disagree. I think toxic things are very clear, and it should be the same for everyone. And I think people who think that there's a gray area are people who maybe kind of like the toxicity a little bit, and maybe like the people who are a little toxic, and that's fine. But that's on you. I'm not playing that game. I catch a lot of crap for making vague statements about toxicity and people in the community and stuff like that. But if people saw the tweets and the direct messages and the different communications I've received from people directly affiliated, or actually the people I'm talking about being the source of those things, you would understand why I just don't have any patience for it and why I do comment on it. I don't care if someone says that they're the biggest fan of the Division 2 franchise or the Division franchise. If all they do is spit vitriol and call people stupid and call people bad names and say awful things about them and don't actually give any real criticism of the game, they just spit, vomit at everything. You're not a real fan. You're not a fan. I will be very staunchly on that opinion, and I won't deal with you. I'm just done. When there was a little incident a month and a half, 2 months ago, where a bunch of people lied about a bunch of stuff and lied about what I said, I got blocked by a bunch of people, and it's honestly been for the best, because so far not a single person blocked me who I blocked in return, who I miss. I lost nothing when it comes to quality conversation and content. And I guess I'm just getting very impatient with the little amount of time I have to put up with that stuff. So if you're offended that I hide a comment, or if I mute you, or if I unfollow you or something like that, I guess don't take it personally. I mean, that's on you. I'm happy to have a conversation is where I'll leave it. Well, that isn't the most fun place to leave this podcast. I'm good with it. I think it's fun to get a little bit real here and there. I'm very imperfect. I've had my moments where I've definitely been a hypocrite, and I haven't always handled things as well as I wish I could have. I do stand by everything I've ever said and done, and I do not like the way I've behaved, especially earlier in my quote unquote creation, whatever you call this journey. But I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now, and I'm really confident with how I feel about things and where I stand. And I'm really confident with how I want to conduct myself and the environment I want to work in. So I very much welcome and thank everyone who's a part of it and who enjoys, listening to me. And I'm always happy to catch your opinions, even if they're the opposite of mine. But what I want to do is have an actual conversation and a back and forth, and not just to be called names and to be dismissed. So there's that. To wrap things up here, if you want to support the podcast and my other content, please check out my Patreon at patreon.com/theechocast. If you're on iTunes listening to this, please rate the podcast and leave a review. I am Bondiesel on Twitch, twitch.tv/Bondiesel, where I try to stream 3 or 4 times a week. I am also at Bondiesel on Twitter, where you can catch my thoughts, state of the game live tweets, and the occasional foot in my own mouth. Last, if you want some cool The EchoCast or Bondiesel merch, check out bondiesel.live/merch. Lost my H there. That's all I have. Until next time.